I want to talk to some of the single parents that are out there who only have one child. I applaud your efforts. It's a lot of hard work being two persons to one child. But there are circumstances that happen sometimes later on in life that could be detrimental to that child. Let me give you a scenario, and I'm sure this is something that you have heard. I spoke in a previous audio about a gentleman whose retirement plans were interrupted because his oldest daughter moved in on him when she lost her job due to the world situation, and she literally had taken over the house. And any time that he tries to have company with any women, she rushes them off. And that made me think about this particular subject because I've seen it before. And there's usually a lot of men are guilty of it, but there are women guilty of it as well. There are a couple of textbook terms I'm going to bring into play. The first one is called the Oedipus complex. Now, some of you have probably already heard that. There was a story back in the day, and there was a character by the name of Oedipus who literally fell in love with his mother and became obsessed with her. The complex was derived in psychological circles because they noticed that there might have been a child that was overly fixated on the opposite sex parent. It would be a young man that would be overly fixated or obsessed with his mother. On the flip side of that, there's what's called the Electra complex, and that applies to a female child that has an excessive attachment and obsession with her male parent. And it's to the point where it's unhealthy. There's nothing wrong with being very attached to your parents, but when it's to the point where you actually experience feelings that are experienced in romantic relationships like jealousy and worry, and you have the type of the idea of companionship of your mind is less of a parent and child, but more so of a partner, a romantic partner. There are a lot of women in this world that were in positions where they had to raise their sons by themselves. And sometimes it might be due to death, sometimes it could be of incarceration or whatever the case may be. She never had any other children and really wholeheartedly committed herself to this male child to raise him and to make sure that he's a fruitful and productive citizen. So that took a lot of years of sacrifice in her life. She never took any interest in dating or even tried to consider getting romantically involved with a member of the opposite sex throughout the whole time that she was raising her child, which is understandable in some cases because for safety reasons, they might not feel that it is necessary to bring someone around who is not the father of that child at risk of putting that child in possible danger. There could be trust issues on her end where she's so bitter and angry behind the breakup with the father that she has no trust or faith in dating at all. That's an issue that went unresolved, and what she did is she channeled those feelings into her raising of this son and made the son a proverbial substitute for the father. She made her son, her man. In the case of fathers raising young girls, you see a lot of that nowadays, and they might do the same thing. They might date someone every now and again, but never commit to anyone seriously because in their minds, they're figuring, this is my lady. This is my woman. This is the most important woman in my life. I'm not diminishing the role of the child as being important in your life, but I mean, there are boundaries to everything. And even though there might not be any physical incest or anything involved in the relationship, those feelings are strong beyond the boundaries of a mother and child. That they're right on that line, and that line is a little blurred. So let's say that person gets grown, that son or that only child, that only son, that only daughter. They've gotten so used to everything being the attention being on them and having so much responsibility and having such a role in their parents' life. when they get grown and they start developing relationships and building careers and of that nature, they still have that attachment in the back of their mind of their parent. So even though they're developing, they don't want their parent to develop. You see what I mean? In other words, if they're gone off to college, they're getting involved in relationships, they're doing things, all these different things, working and everything else, they still have care for that parent. But when that parent chooses to do the same things, then it's a problem. It's a problem. And I hear from more men than I do females. I'm starting to hear more from females now, that when they hear that their older parent goes back out into the dating world, because they've done their job. You know, you're self-sufficient, you're grown, you're doing your own thing. Why should they sit around and just be an audience to you? That's not what they were doing when they were raising you. They were actively raising you and providing you with a foundation so you could live on your own. They've done their job. So don't you think it would be fair that they are entitled to a little bit of happiness for themselves? But no, you want them to be available at a moment's notice for every single little thing that goes on in your life, in your life. But you don't want them to move on and have a life for themselves. And it's not fair. And I see from a lot of men who get very upset, especially when I ask them, I was like, well, you know, why can't your mother go on a date? She's my mother. I know that. But you're grown now. You're 30-some years old. You're 40-some years old. Your mother is of her right mind. You don't have to be there around her all of the time. She's in a position where she can take care of herself somewhat. Even if she has some health problems, they're not to the point where she's bedridden. She can live by herself. She can, take care of herself. She's not that old. But you're trying to make her situation where she desperately needs you all of the time. Oh, well, I do so-and-so for her every single day. Okay, let her new man do it if it's required. Let him step in and take over. It's like they have feelings of jealousy. For some reason, they're afraid that if mom goes and gets a boyfriend or if dad goes and gets a girlfriend, that they're going to be kicked out of their lives. And see, that's a very childish mindset to have, because as a child, you have a position in your parents' life. They're not going to turn around and just raise you all those years and then the minute they have a date or two, just kick you to the curb. You need to stop thinking that way, because what you're doing is you're doing two things. Number one, you're making your parent miserable. And what's going to wind up happening eventually, because that parent is alone all the time and you won't let anybody near them, and I mentioned this in a previous audio, they're going to sit there and try to figure out things to do. And 9 times out of 10, those things to do involve jumping up and down in your business and being in your face all the time. Then after the fact, you're going to be like, oh man, I wish mom would just stay home sometime. I wish she would go out. I wish dad would just mind his own business. He needs to go to, oh, no. Don't complain about it now. Because when they tried to go out there and get a life for themselves, every single person that came around, they weren't good enough. You were rude. There was a problem. And the average person coming in off the street, if they come in and they're trying to date somebody and see that their grown-ass child is all in their feelings all the time, they're not going to want to be around that person, because they're like, you know what, I can get somebody else who's got it together. I don't need all this. They don't have to take that. So when you are busy running off mama's boyfriends or running off daddy's girlfriends or just potential dates or any member of the opposite sex that wanted their attention, you thought it was cute then. But now that you're grown and you have situations going on and mom and daddy by themselves, then you're upset because they're always needing you for something or always up in your business. Now you need a break now? Which one is it? Either mom and daddy can have a life or they can't. And that's really not your decision anyway. You are the child. Okay? Remember your place. Just saying.